Total Warhammer 3, a game about raising massive armies, touring the world, and taking on great horrors in search of fame, fortune, and treasure. But maybe the real treasure is the friends we make along the way, as we try to beat a Total Warhammer campaign with Tamurkhan and the boys. Specifically, we'll be trying to get a long campaign victory and cement ourselves as King of the Worms by claiming the Nemesis crown on the hardest difficulty and dealing with a ticking time bomb, all while only recruiting Tamurkhan and his band of merry men. No units, no generic heroes, no other lords, just one small party of smelly misfits. Unfortunately, Tamurkhan doesn't start with any of them, and we had to spend 7 dominance each time we wanted to unlock one. Luckily, we started with 5, so we only needed 2 victories to get our first Chieftain. Until then, we had none, so after giving everyone who showed up for work a permanent vacation, it was just Tamurkhan against a small army of Norscan nobodies. Decisive defeat? Yeah, I don't think so. Well, on the bright side, it only took him 2 turns to come back, and even though we had purchased Nurgle's premium healthcare package, it was clear we couldn't use brute force until we leveled up our legendary lord and made some friends. To do this, we'd make some enemies. Literally. By raiding our own territory, we could cause a rebellion and... well, I'm sure they won't follow us. Yes, this was our plan all along. The strategy when fighting as a Nurgle faction is simple. The enemy can't kill you if you don't die. Our units are walking petri dishes that nobody wants to touch, because the list of diseases they carry rivals the number of Cetra's titles.
Great King of Nehekana, King of Kings, Blessed of Picture, Lord of the Great Mortis River, the All-King. Who are you again?
And after dealing or taking enough damage, we could use that premium healthcare package to heal up to 5 units or characters. 10 minutes later, and anybody who didn't die of disease or boredom gave up and ran away. Winning the battle gave us some cash and XP for Tamurkhan, leveling him up. As lords and heroes leveled up, we could spend skill points to unlock abilities that many considered to be unnatural. However, these stronger upgrades usually required us to unlock a previous skill or reach a certain level. So until then, we could start on the blue line for buffs on the campaign map, the red line for buffs to our army's 0 units, or the yellow line for buffs to Tamurkhan himself. Yep, that's a no-brainer. We also got our first point of dominance, but we still needed 1 more to get our first member of Tamurkhan's gang. Since Karen didn't run away to heal and was tiring his army out by raiding our land, it gave us the opportunity to finish the army off. But since they weren't close enough to the settlement, this time it was just up to our main maggot. Fortunately, we could even the odds by contracting a disease.
What's wrong with me? Why can't I feel?
Nurgle factions can spread plagues that cripple enemies or give us superpowers. For a normal individual, liquefied lungs would probably suck. But we're genetic freaks, and we're not normal!
I've got this, it's perfect!
And that wasn't the only trick up our sleeves. See, this isn't actually Tamurkhan. This is, because Papa Nurgle would still love you, even if you were a worm. Tamurkhan jumps from host to host, puppeting whomever's throat he jumps down, reflected in a special ability that automatically sucks the life out of the nearest lord or hero when he's about to die. Using this and our other healing abilities, we managed to take down about half their army. So when Tamurkhan was about to die, we quit.
Bye.
By conceding defeat, we lived to fight another day, which just so happened to be today. As we were still plagued, we still had the Fleshy Abundance ability, meaning we could bring Tamurkhan back to about 3000 HP before even engaging. But Marco, the enemy army doesn't have a singular lord now. Okay, then I guess Tamurkhan will just have to feast on the entire unit leading the army. Hanging on by a tendon, he managed to finish off the Marauders, giving us our second victory and first legendary hero. On turn 5. Kazk the Befouled was our first chieftain, because we had no choice. On top of being a powerhouse in the field, each chieftain brought their own unique buffs to the party, and we could spend dominance to unlock special units from their faction, or activate limited time abilities for the chieftain's army. Very helpful. However, we couldn't use these abilities or buff their buffs until we proved to be real homies by slaughtering their rivals and engaging in their favorite pastimes. For Kazk, it was taking down other chaotic factions and manufacturing diseases. While Tamurkhan healed up, Kazk harassed the Norscans to make the impending fight just a bit easier. And because it was free XP. The impending fight never came. But Kolek did.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Turns out the Norscan tribe we started at war with just so happened to be his vassal. With the reinforcing garrison, we had a chance at making sure the campaign didn't end before turn 10. There was just, one slight problem. Our reinforcements were gonna come from all the way over there. And Nurgle units aren't exactly renowned for their speed. We could make the reinforcements spawn on our side, it just meant we had to hold out for 5 minutes. Luckily, instead of throwing everything they had at us, most of the army just kinda stood around and watched. When backup arrived, they kept everyone else occupied while we had Tamurkhan duke it out with Kolek. But even with Kaesk's ability to lower his defenses, Kolek still beat the snot out of him. Oh no. Anyways, once Kolek fled, the rest of his army crumbled pretty much immediately, giving us a way easier win than I had anticipated, proving that anyone who says Tammy has a rough start because of Kolek is more full of shit than a great unclean one, and making Tamurkhan a lumberjack. Legendary lords all have unique defeat traits that buff the lord who defeated them, their army, or the whole faction. And honestly, judging by how long it's taking us to claim our first province, not to mention the impending ultimate crisis, I didn't think we'd be getting even a short victory anytime soon. So once we brought peace, freedom, and stability to our new province, we'd be going on a world tour to prepare for what's coming. I know that in the lore this is roughly the route that Tamurkhan took on his way to Nuln, but here's a route with some chest hair. In preparation for the world tour, we continuously sacked the gallows tree until Kolek came back for seconds. Who would win? An ancient dragon ogre as tall as a mountain that swings a hammer the size of a house and who literally scared the sun away, or a few germy boys? This victory that probably shouldn't have been one increased Kaesk's fealty, which completed a quest that gave us enough dominance to recruit another chieftain, Kargan the Crazed.
I am more than just a leper in armor.
An exalted hero too angry to die, whose hobbies included terrorizing humans and committing arson. With 3 tough SOBs, we could finally go on the offensive and take the gallows tree, which had plenty of targets for us to test Tamurkhan's new ability on. You know, because powerful chieftains, units from other factions, and Tamurkhan himself weren't enough. His faction needed a bacteria bomb. After 8.5 minutes of this, we finally did what everyone else does on turn 1 and secured our starting province on turn 15. Our terrifying trio tore through our chaotic rivals until they became a fearful foursome when we enlisted the help of a magical cyclops lizard named Cathay. And after a minor greenskin faction made a fatal error, he proved himself worthy of being one of the boys by cutting down 300 of them. This didn't mean every battle was a walk in the park. Now that Tamurkhan could regenerate HP, we didn't have to micromanage him or Kaesk. But Kargan and Cathay didn't have that luxury. So once a battle was won, they'd celebrate with some healthy group hugs. After a slow start, things were finally turning around for us. We even got to meet the President of Chaos, who demanded we pay our taxes. With no army to upkeep, we could pay him, but 1, don't wanna, and 2, his defeat trait would be helpful even if it delayed the world tour. We beat Kolek's ass once and for all, finally making a dent in our short campaign progress. Unfortunately, not before he turned our lizard wizard into paste. Thankfully, legendary heroes can't permanently be killed, and after a few short turns in the ER, Cathay would be back. The silver lining is we looted a copy of How to Train Your Pet Toad Dragon and tamed the biggest one we could find. Bubbles here massively increased Tamurkhan's stats, shot snot rockets, and tore through armies like, well, pick your pandemic. We made our way back north to deal with Archaon and his Norscan vassal, which left the cities we just took undefended. To ensure renowned workplace safety violator and unpaid intern collector Zatan the Black would turn his attention towards Grimgore and hopefully knock off our second short victory faction for us, we paid him a measly sum of 13,000 gold. And it worked. Meanwhile, Tamurkhan and the boys took Jarl's settlement, giving us enough dominance to recruit the goodest boy, Mornhowl. Mandoggo was a stalker that would teach us the ways of the wolf if we broke stuff and brought down furries, scalies, Reddit mods, and short businessmen. We got what we want by beating Archaon twice, gaining protection against all threats, physical or magical. And then we sold him back his own city, partly so that he could deal with Boris for us and we'd avoid a useless defeat trait, and partly so we could finally begin the world tour. Heading east, Cathay rejoined the gang. We got paid to watch a faction of beastmen die. Archaon learned to ask for money instead of demanding it, we still didn't give him any, and we completed a quest for researching technologies. As unintuitive as it may seem, we've been researching all of the military techs that buff our units, even though we have none. Because at the end of each branch were unique army abilities and, more importantly, big buffs for Tamurkhan and our chieftains. But we couldn't get them without spending a ton of infections, which we didn't have a lot of since they're used for creating plagues. We could slowly gain infections by growing and distributing shrooms, or, more efficiently, we could harvest them from corpses and complete quests. Our disease spreading and chaos murdering had nearly secured Kask's friendship, and if we helped him with one last problem, he'd be our BFFL. All we needed to do was take down Fatsod, a great unclean one that was feasting on our troops. Poor guy must have been starving. 7 more dominance meant we could recruit Gruckmer Threehorn to the party, a beast man who could summon a bigger beast man that threw rocks and had a disdain for all things undead. Even though we were one chieftain short, the world tour of death and disease was about to kick off in not China.
Hey, I've seen this one.
To get into Cathay, we needed to get through their not-so-great wall, and one of the gates just so happened to be held by a magical tapeworm with a useful defeat trait. The only problem is we couldn't reach him. Yet. Instead of making our way towards village, we torched his nearby vassal settlement, because after raising it, Kargan would refill 25% of our movement meter, giving us just enough to reach the Twisted Twin. This was a simple fight. Or so I thought. Siege factions are annoying for an infinite number of reasons, including recharging barriers and burning our flesh faster than we could regenerate it. And although a Chaos Dragon mount made Kargan much more deadly, it also made him a much bigger target. With a ton of micromanaging and honestly a lot of luck, we made it out with everyone alive. Barely. Our reward was more melee defense for Tamurkhan and biggering the party's blue bar. Having a high winds of magic didn't just mean our wizards could cast more spells, but it also gave the party bonus movement range and melee defense, so we'd want to keep it high. Now in Cathay, we burned down a local town, convinced village it was just a prank bro, and recruited our final chieftain, Azar Doombolt, a chaos dwarf with a gun and fondness for loot, dead rats, greenies, and other stunties. With all the boys finally assembled, we hunted down the dragon siblings, defeating Mao Ying and sending Zhao Ming to the Shadow Realm, giving our whole party bonus melee defense and armor. The Cathay portion of the tour was almost complete. We just needed to find
I am supreme!
This guy. Defeating the magical gold mask would give our party even more armor, if he ever showed up. While we waited for Gelt to make an appearance, we trashed his cities and our heroes held a competition to assassinate a Cathay in general, with the winner getting a healing potion.
You suck. Pathetic. Well done.
Honestly, I probably would have just given it to Kargan anyways. Leveling up isn't the only way to buff our party. Handing out weapons, armor, and other trinkets makes our characters even stronger or gives them helpful abilities. Just another way this felt less like a grand strategy game and more like an RPG. Most equipment could be found on the battlefield, but completing quests also gave us rewards, and it's honestly the only reason we still had our original settlements. Gelt finally showed up 5 turns later with an army full of the Empire's renowned melee infantry. Despite what the game said, it was not even close. With the Cathayan leg of the tour complete, we marched west through Vampire Country and had to sort out a disagreement between our chieftains. Throughout Tamurkhan's campaign, we've had to deal with these dilemmas that often just increase one chieftain's fealty over another. However, sometimes there are consequences. With Quetzalcoatl once again in the ER, we kept marching until we found a small army led by Drazawith the Ashen. And even though he was at war with an ogre faction we needed to destroy for a short campaign victory, he had 2 things we wanted. First, some missile resistance for Tamurkhan, and second, his house. There wasn't anything remotely special about the Black Fortress, it's just that legendary heroes respawn at the own settlement that's closest to where they were wounded, so rather than have Quetzalcoatl trek through the mountains to reach us, we could get the gang back together immediately without delaying the tour. Again. Plus, we really needed to get the hell out of there. We could take them both on, but with that number of settlements and those defeat traits, no thanks. Sure, we had to defeat Goldtooth for the short campaign victory, but I was confident that problem would fix itself. As we continued west, we learned how to summon Plague Bearers. Zatan demanded we pay him so that he could continue to step on our lawn. We helped Kargan kill his arch rival and solidified our friendship, and the Chaos Dwarfs took care of Grimgor for us. All before we reached our stop in the Badlands to visit Wurzag. The Doomsday Clock had officially struck 12. basically meaning several factions just got supercharged, instantly raised full stacks of powerful armies, and they all wanted us dead. So how exactly were 7 stinky boys supposed to deal with all these armies containing thousands of greenies? Easily. One at a time. We had gotten close enough to Mournhowl that he taught us how to ambush an army when attacking them. And if an ambush failed, then it's a good thing last turn we unlocked lightning strike battles to block reinforcing armies. Recent R&D breakthroughs have made Kaisk and Mournhowl faster than curry through a pensioner. So while Tamurkhan and Kargan drew everyone's attention, our speedy boys weaved around units and rushed down enemy lords to take them out quickly. Enemy artillery was stopped by a squad of plague bearers coming in on their left, and our own artillery would soften the armies for our front line while Gruckmer and Ketsak would torment enemies with bats or a pull to another dimension. And while Azar wasn't a massive damage dealer despite his misleading stats, he could help the others by putting a dent in the armor of any tougher targets. In the span of one hold on, we're out of movement. Very long turn. We took out most of Wurzag's armies before beating him to claim a whopping 10% physical damage resistance for Tamurkhan. After our bash in the Badlands, we upgraded a settlement to level 5, unlocking a trinket that let us summon violent birdies. And we continued marching west. Right in front of 4 dwarf full stacks, plus this guy over here. When armies are force marching, they can't retreat, don't fight as well, and if they lose, they're wiped out. Under normal circumstances, most players would probably load an earlier save knowing what lies ahead. But these aren't normal circumstances, because our lizard wizard could just freeze all the enemy armies in the same province as us. We beat the one dwarf army stupid enough to attack us, laughed as the others watched helplessly, and unlocked a whole bunch of Chieftain units because it made our goat boy very happy, even though we'd never used them. As a thank you, he taught us how to use the Beastman pathways, and we ended up right in Morgar's backyard. Unfortunately, he wasn't home, so we broke all his stuff to get his attention. Well, the good news is we no longer needed his attention because a 2-for-1 special just made itself available. So we permanently estalled our Estalian stop and set sail for the Flying Donut. Guys, I'm a dad now. I'm legally allowed to make bad jokes like that. Throughout the campaign, we'd been getting updates on the whereabouts of the Sword of Cain and Nemesis Crown, 2 ridiculously powerful artifacts that make any lord an endgame crisis on their own. But why settle for just one? The Sword of Cain was currently held by High Elf Batman, and if we wanted it, we'd have to take it from his cold, dead hands, which we had no problem with. Like with Morgar, defeating Altharion gives the Lord missile resistance, but seeing as the number of traits a Lord can have is limited, we didn't need both of their defeat traits, so like I said, this literally was a win-win. After a nightmare about cleaning out Grandfather's Garden for Ketsak, we sailed north. In this neck of the sea, sort of, was Prince Sigvald the Magnificent.
I do so hate murderous rage before lunch.
That's too damn bad!
Sigvald had strong defenses and regenerated HP, so to get past this, we needed to strip him down and, just to be safe, turn Tamurkhan into a walking nuke. With this combo, Pretty Boy didn't even last a minute.
I thought you were stronger.
True to his name, Siggy had a magnificent defeat trait that's what I would consider the last mandatory trait that we needed. But Marco, what about Throt for an extra 10% HP? Yeah, he's dead, and was replaced by some random rat that we'd never encounter anyways. With our defeat traits plus skills and equipment, including the Sword of Cain, Tamurkhan ignored 81% of incoming physical damage, 90% of missiles, even though it should be 106, and 71% of spell damage. Then there's Nurgle's favorite son that would just bump everything up to 90% for 40 seconds, and the fact that any damage he did take could just be regenerated. To make fighting him even harder, he also had Unrivaled Aura, and that's just Tamurkhan. Kaisk would severely weaken nearby foes, Kargan scared the life out of apprehensive enemies and ensured nearby allies landed their attacks, Ketsak simultaneously made our party more accurate and harder to hit in melee, while Mournhowl minimized any damage that did get through to him and nearby allies. That's not even including active abilities like the one we got from the Sword of Cain, which also gave Tamurkhan pretty absurd strength. Sadly, defeating Grombrindle meant also getting his defeat trait. If our trait list wasn't full, what defeat trait could be so bad that I'm glad we didn't get? Causes terror when fighting dwarfs. Bro, we do that on our own. We don't need your head to do that. As payback for almost wasting a trade slot, and because Azar was almost ready to become a BFF, we slaughtered as many dwarfs as we could to unlock his quest battle, avenging his Chorf buddies by taking down a pile of rocks. Speaking of BFFs, we also purchased enough units to appease Mr. Beastman, who dared us to spend a night in the darkest part of a haunted forest. Sadly, not for $1 million or anything like that. The creatures that came out at night were no match for Tamurkhan, who soloed the army of nearly 4,500 beastmen. Now that we were done collecting defeat traits, we could finally head towards the Empire for our final stop on the world tour, and on the way we finished researching the last technology in the military tree, giving our whole party more damage and much better survivability. Oh, and Village continued being a blood-sucking parasite. Touching down on the shores of the Empire, we were fittingly welcomed by a mob of rotting corpses.
Ooh, I'm so scared. Ooh.
Now, we knew the Nemesis crown was currently held by Sylvania, so we marched through the Empire, somehow avoiding war declarations, and found the Lord wearing the crown, and their entourage. Now, we could just lightning strike and take on the one army to secure the crown, but did we need to? No, probably not. But just to be safe, we shrank our hearts, and Cathay learned how to temporarily undead their army. 7 Nurgly boys versus 5,000 undead abominations. What could possibly go wrong? My first thought was to, as usual, have Mordhowl and Kask double team the Lord, hopefully getting an early kill and cutting off one of their main sources of healing. This was a great plan until they got caught in traffic, as did our wizards, so we sent Kargan to help clear the way, but he got scared and ran away for a bit despite riding a 2-headed dragon. We made sure to avoid this problem with Azar by calling in a unit of plague bearers to protect him as he took pot shots at one of their lords. While the reinforcing armies arrived and our heroes returned to the fight, Tamurkhan was in the middle of the foulest mosh pit ever seen, giving us a perfect opportunity to summon a Swordnado and have Cathay send any survivors to the pit.
My God, it's a black hole!
Unfortunately, one of the lords managed to break free from the crowd. Unfortunately for him, that is. Despite this, our good doggo had to flee the fight, and our beast boy wasn't far behind. The undead blob didn't just make moving hard, but the amount of potential targets overwhelmed our boys, and they'd often refuse to follow our commands, if they even attacked at all.
No thanks, bro.
Kask had a surprisingly low kill count and had almost burned through all of his regenerative HP, at one point being a cough away from death. Somehow though, he managed to break free, so we benched him before he ended up in the ER. The main crowd was still tied up with Tamurkhan while stragglers harassed Kargan and Azar, leaving Cathay free to cast spells from a distance, until he got the attention of their lord on a dragon and was knocked out. It's funny though that we're stressing with Tamurkhan's boys when Tommy himself didn't even have a scratch after over 12 minutes of non-stop fighting, and eventually the vampires gave up the fight and the Nemesis crown. We now had a choice. We could resist the temptation for power and seal the crown away, because while keeping it would make our party even stronger, it would make everyone like us a little less.
Oh no! I'm devastated.
The Sword of Cain worked the same way, except these dilemmas would pop up every couple of turns until we fully leveled it up, while we needed to keep fighting to hold on to and upgrade the Nemesis crown. Obviously the stat buffs together were crazy, as were the downsides, but their abilities synergized even better, since getting caught in the sword text left any survivors enraged, distracting them from the incoming magical mortars. So now that we had the Nemesis crown, all we had to do was go and take Nuln, right?
Yes, but actually no.
Grabbing Nuln may have been a task for our long campaign victory, but so was achieving our short campaign victory. Oh, and becoming BFFLs with the entire gang. While we defeated Kolek and the Chorf Alliance dealt with Grimgor for us, Grease's Lightning was still alive and kicking as the endgame crisis caravan of Blue Roses hadn't taken him out, but befriended him. As we clearly couldn't rely on the other factions, we had to deal with him ourselves. Traversing the pathways through the mountains, we put down the undead who came back for seconds, upgraded the Nemesis crown, found some lost Tomb Kings that were no doubt headed for our capital.
How about new?
Exterminated a few rats, and once again refused to pay taxes to the Everchosen, until we came upon Darkhold, an ogre settlement with a Nurgle cult hidden within. Not that we needed to, but we made the fight even easier by giving everyone inside the city a mild cold. With 7 settlements to go, and most of them being in Cathay, we hopped on the Dawizar Express. As annoying as it was to be back here and dealing with the ogres, we needed to feed the goodest boy anyways. But before we could do that, we made a deal with the asshole appendage. We took one of his most important settlements and sold it back to him in exchange for a ton of dead ogres and some apology money. What made the city so important, you ask? A level 1 barracks.
Perhaps the worst trade deal ever made.
We once again crashed through Cathay, leveling up the Nemesis crown, toppling the Ogre Tyrant, and making another enemy who we'd never actually encounter, while an old foe bravely fought our undefended settlements. On the bright side, we killed enough ogres to convince Mornhowl we were dog people, and he let us help him establish Dita by saving the wolves from a hungry Jabberslaith. With everyone in the party now BFFs, all we had to do was take down Greasus and make our way back to the Empire to take Nuln. However, because of the additional rules I made, we had to make sure we kept the Nemesis crown, which was now at full strength, by winning a fight every 3 turns. This was made a bit easier by the ridiculous buffs it gave our party, not to mention even more AoE damage for Tamurkhan, but not too easy since our allies actually made themselves useful for once. With only 1 settlement left, we had a path to finish off the ogres and ride the train back to Zarnagrund.
No one can stop us!
Why are you the way that you are?
As a thank you for getting rid of Greasus and giving us our short campaign victory, we attacked his vassal. And despite the very on-brand trickery, we somehow avoided war with Village, kept a hold of the crown, and made our way back to the Darklands. Suck on that, tapeworm. To get to the station that would take us back to the Empire, we had to trek north, thankfully through some enemies, keeping our party healthy and the crown satiated. And wouldn't you know it, the train dropped us off pretty much where we touched down in the Empire back on turn 92. And just like on turn 92, we were greeted by a mob of the undead. Now, our party could definitely handle this even without lightning striking, but I was curious to see how well the Maggot Man could handle it all on his own. So we gave the rest of the party the night off and watched as Tamurkhan fought through 4,000 rotting corpses without breaking a sweat. But honestly, that was just against a pretty terrible crap stack. And while we could get to Nuln in this turn or the next, I wanted to see just how tough Tammy was.
How tough are you?
So we took a look at the leaderboard and challenged the #1 ranked Ungrim Iron Fist to an even fight.
Alright, so we're going into this fight with a fully leveled Sword of Cain and Nemesis crown, a set of bleeding lungs, high winds of magic, and we're sitting in camp stance to bolster our defenses.
We also made the decision to hop off Bubabolos because, well... the dwarves couldn't shoot over one another, for some reason, and decided the best course of action would be to swarm Tamurkhan, because that's the best way to fight a near unkillable monster with 2 WMDs and infinite diseases. And those who weren't killed by either one of those were killed by friendly fire from their own artillery. Once Ungrim and the rest of the stubborn stunties had died, we ran to the trees for cover while we advanced on our artillery, leaving only a single blimp that had to flee since it was unable to land. Funny thing is, I also forgot to re-equip this banner on Tamurkhan, so this could have actually been even easier. Now that we undeniably proved Tamurkhan was worthy of ascending to demonhood, it was time to finally capture Nuln, but back home, Archaon decided to raise our settlements and the stakes. Without anywhere to call home, we took attrition every turn, and if our party was wiped out, it was game over. To keep things even more interesting and provide a consistent source of healing, we declared war on humanity and took the scenic route to stomp some more dwarfs and commit deforestation. Several torch towns later, we reached Nuln, and I realized we never did Tamurkhan's quest battle, essentially a pre-siege of Nuln, which was currently undefended. Because just doing the quest and then winning yet another siege battle would be a mind-numbingly anticlimactic way to finish the campaign, we wouldn't be attacking it until Elspeth von Draken, leading a full army, was defending it. So we left to destroy whatever other settlements she had until she garrisoned Nuln, which wasn't easy because Karl Franz just kept gifting her settlements. Eventually she did enter Nuln and started raising an army. So we passed the turns by dealing with Karl and his Franzer division, committing several war crimes against humanity, collecting some more firewood, and, just for shits and giggles, burning Altdorf to the ground. With Elspeth finally seated in Nuln and ready to protect it, the time had come to finish this campaign that we could have beat over 20 turns ago. Our putrid party fought past the 1st Battalion while we dropped plague bearers and nukes on their artillery teams, which brought out some beastmen allies to help deal with Nuln's reinforcements. Not that we really needed their help. God, I really wish I could have made that more exciting. After that sad bit of foreplay, it was finally time to take
Chaos filth.
God damn it. The Slayer King was back for vengeance and to take Nuln for himself. But what he and his army of 3,000 dwarfs didn't expect was Quetzal's spell that undeads makes the unbreakable breakable. The Slayer King fled the battlefield, truly proving the leaderboard rankings are made up and the points don't matter, but not without making a decent dent in our party's health, and unfortunately Azar's magical healing powers needed a break. Wounded but not broken, we were ready to fight for Nuln. But I mean, come on, after everything we've been through, did you really think we weren't gonna win this fight? After 143 turns with no units recruited and only using one army of Tamurkhan and his chieftains, we trekked across the world, defeated countless legendary lords, claimed the Sword of Cain and Nemesis crown, took the city of Nuln, and achieved a long campaign victory, proving there really is nothing stronger than the power of friendship. With all that done, there was just one thing left to take care of. Thank you for watching. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially Shadow, CallMeJosh, and MrEwok. Many of you are probably wondering where I've been all year, and I promise I've been busy for a very good reason. But don't worry, more Total Warhammer, BG3, and Elden Ring content is in the pipeline, as well as some other surprises. Have a good one, and I'll see you on the next video.